For all of the context regarding my experience with the first Sonic movie, watch my review of that movie all the way through, because there are some details there that I will be referencing throughout this whole sequel review. There will also be an entire section debunking some of the negative points I made in that review. As a result, spoilers for the first Sonic movie will be completely unmarked throughout this entire video. So if for some reason you still haven't seen the first Sonic movie, see that movie first before you proceed any further. It is quite remarkable how lucky the first Sonic movie was and how close of a call it was when it came to its release date. I haven't followed as much Sonic movie news in its early years of its production, but I think I remember it getting delayed quite a few times before late 2018 when it was finally confirmed and announced for November 2019. But then when the initial Sonic movie design got torn to shreds with the release of the first trailer, director Jeff Fowler, an actual hero at this point, successfully got the studio to redesign the character to a more pleasing look. But that came at the cost of additional character animation and CG render times, causing the movie to be delayed again, and rightfully so this time, to February 2020. 1 month before the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States and shuttered movie theaters across the country. Because of that, this movie would ultimately become the highest grossing superhero movie, the third highest grossing Hollywood movie, and the sixth highest grossing movie in general of the year. Had it been delayed any further, it might not have come out in theaters at all and went straight to subscription streaming services, which I'll get to later, or it might not have come out for another year or even longer, or worst case scenario, it might have flopped for the same reason Onward and Tenet flopped, despite the latter grossing more than the Sonic movie anyway. When the pandemic first truly began, I have been so scared about us all dying at the hands of this disease that I've been imagining the existence of a spin-off called Sonic After Humanity, one of the first Paramount Plus original movies, in which an infection similar to COVID-19 wipes out all of humanity, leaving Sonic as the only survivor due to some alien immunity he has. The majority of the movie would play out similarly to I Am Legend, without any sort of vampiric zombie beings because no one would become zombies from this infection. From this point until the end of this section, indirect I Am Legend spoilers will be plentiful because what this hypothetical Sonic sequel contains mirrors events in that movie. Halfway through, Sonic's daily radio broadcasts would eventually be answered by Tails. And maybe that is why Tails was looking for him at the end of the first Sonic movie. He was looking for his radio broadcasts that started with the extinction of humanity at the hands of this infection. When Sonic meets Tails for the first time in this version, Tails introduces himself as Miles Prower, nothing special. Of course, Sonic never called him that, and for a while referred to him as just Kid and Buddy. Shortly after, Sonic rants at him about how every single human being, especially his friends, is dead. Tails rushes off to the basement in tears over not being able to calm him down because he's even younger than Sonic and is in less control, of course. Sonic later feels sorry for him, walks slowly to him, and starts apologizing to him, referring to him as Tails for the first time. To his shock, in much the same way he referred to Robotnik as Eggman and Tom Wachowski as Donut Lord in the first Sonic movie. And then by the end, Eggman would show up and say that this was part of his master plan to exterminate the whole human race using a man-made virus. Or maybe, as I really wanted it to be when I first came up with the idea, the virus would be completely natural and Eggman had no involvement whatsoever. Either way, he would take over the humanless planet for his own personal gain, and Sonic and Tails would stop him together. And then at the very end, with the once dominating human species having no chance of coming back, Sonic and Tails would invite inhabitants from other planets to rebuild, as tales and narration would say as the very last word said by anyone in this imaginary movie. They would recolonize the planet and rename it to Mobius. That idea came from the base of a theory by my friend Granny Tamias. As I said in my review of the first Sonic movie, I had an imaginary Sonic movie series which would have lasted from 2008 to 2013. In that universe, Mobius and Earth are actually separate planets from each other. That was the theory I supported for the longest time, and was probably also the theory Sonic X used as well. But in his theory, Mobius actually is Earth in the future because he's a speculative nature scientist and loves theories like these, even though historically in this franchise, Mobius maps don't quite line up with Earth maps. And then from this point onward, this universe's version of this movie would pick up right from where it left off, with humans gone from the newly named Mobius, and the rest of the series would follow that timeline. But obviously, since this is an imaginary movie with no impact on anything whatsoever, that would probably never happen, and the actual Sonic movie sequel would ultimately feature Donut Lord alive and well, and Tails would introduce himself as Tails.
Name's Tails.
Unfortunately, with the advent of the pandemic shuttering theaters, tons of premium streaming services from the big Hollywood studios started becoming extremely viable to them. Because it's so easy nowadays to host digital anything, I actually predicted that the movie theater business would die out for good. I'm not saying that I wanted them to die, in favor of streaming services exclusively. Netflix, originally a mail-in DVD rental service, eventually became the de facto premium streaming service for the longest time. The original reason why I never wanted to have a subscription, though, is because timeless classics kept leaving, and those that came should have come long ago. That thought process came from my boomer mentality of wanting Netflix to keep following their streaming library philosophy the same exact way they follow their DVD rental philosophy. As I realized later, though, it might be because of renewing and expiring licenses. But now that studios are fed up with paying licensing fees to streaming services like Netflix and Hulu, they all decided, quite simultaneously, remember this was before the pandemic, to make their own separate streaming services to put their entire respective back catalogs on, with a separate subscription fee for each one. And with the theater business not being nearly as profitable due to COVID, these studios have decided to dump their newest releases on their subscription services right away, sometimes in the case of Disney, exclusively, with no chance of a theatrical release except for in markets where their service is not available. Other times, in the case of Warner Brothers, along with a simultaneous theatrical release. Which had me fearing that this Sonic movie sequel might end up exclusively on Paramount Plus, the streaming service owned by that movie studio, and not in theaters or on digital locker services, at least as a rental, whatsoever. If that happened, this video would be titled Sonic Movie 2, No Review from Paramount Plus. I refuse. And there wouldn't be any sort of description of what happens in the movie or my thoughts on it whatsoever. I am not going to pay a monthly subscription fee for tons of programs I will never watch just to watch a single Sonic movie now for a review. And I certainly don't want to resort to piracy, considering how much it has actually risen since these subscription services started cropping up. And no, my reason is not because of a risk of downloading malware. I suppose that rise in movie piracy is because of the next point I'm about to make. Who wants to pay collectively hundreds a month just to have a chance to see everything? I'm sure a lot of you already realize this and don't want to hear me say it simply because it would be completely redundant, but this is basically cable TV all over again. But as the pandemic gradually died down throughout 2021, theatrical releases were gradually starting to make sense to studios again, with Marvel Studios basically saying welcome back last May by announcing their mostly theatrical exclusive upcoming lineup. And once Shang-Chi made enough bank at the theatrical box office, its parent company Disney decided to start going back to theatrical exclusivity for the first 45 days of a film's release. and then the Sonic movie sequel's trailer ended with "in theaters," and then I safely saw Spider-Man No Way Home at the theater. So I think I'm good, although they will still be making a Knuckles spin-off series for Paramount Plus, so... When I uploaded my first Sonic movie review, I had truly hoped that somebody would come in and prove all of the negative points I said in that review wrong. Thankfully, some of these points got debunked since that video came up. There weren't very many comments on my video at all, let alone ones that did debunk my negative points, but still, a majority of the ones that did get debunked took place outside the comments section. I will go over every single negative thing I said about the first Sonic movie and turn them into positives as I have promised at the end of that review video. If I skip over any of them, then that means that either I still stand by what I said about them or I can't remember how they were debunked. First, let's go through the only comment on that video that actually attempted to debunk a negative point I had. Gamer Krabs Double Z on YouTube said in response to my saying, "What's the point of Sonic's parental guardian being an owl of all species?" that it was a rehash of the owls as tiki heads in Labyrinth Zone. I'm not sure if I see any resemblance to owls in any of these symbols, but thanks anyway. Actually, one of the Easter eggs in the Sonic movie sequel's trailer gave me another positive towards that detail. The Master Emerald Temple had owl imagery, which finally made me realize that whichever world Sonic originally came from had owls as a very common species and were very symbolic of their world. Rings as an interdimensional transportation device? Well... This was one negative that I actually debunked all by myself, and considering me playing these classic games involving the special stages in the past, I am such a dumbass to have ever considered this a negative in the first place. Quick addendum a few weeks after first making this section. I just saw the movie again just a few days before the sequel's release just to get it fresh in my mind and be prepared, and I found out that that first time Sonic rolls into a ball blending in with the other balls wasn't even the first time. I don't think I ever paid attention to those freeze frame bonuses back at the theater when he did the same thing jumping into his cave, and even further back during the prologue as a kid. I guess I never really paid attention at all to any Easter eggs in movies. Or maybe Sonic really is that fast of a creature. But there was still one other point that somebody else debunked for me. The point of Sonic having unnecessary lightning powers. The GSP on Twitter theorized that those lightning powers are actually chaos powers, and he gets that way whenever he gets emotional, which would tie him to using Chaos Emeralds. He just needs to learn to control it as he's a teenager and all. Speaking of which, I sorta expected that the Chaos Emeralds would not show up at all in the first Sonic movie in their physical forms whatsoever, because we don't want to be too overcomplicated with the lore in only the first installment. But now that a sequel is about to exist, there's absolutely no excuse. The Chaos Emeralds need to show up here at some point or another. And thankfully, the trailer gave us a look at them. Well, actually a look at possibly just the Master Emerald, and judging from what we're seeing so far, the other Chaos Emeralds might still not appear after all. But it doesn't even matter at this point. Everything can be interpreted as a good thing or a bad thing, as I have said time and time again in my first review, which all comes down to this next section here. I actually wouldn't want to make any more media reviews for reasons I'm about to discuss, but I know you may want to hear my thoughts on the Sonic movie sequel anyway, so that would have been the sole reason why I'm making this video and videos reviewing any future live-action Sonic movies in its continuity, including the already announced third installment. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother if not for a particular revelation, which I'll get to later, and here's why. When I first got Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric for Christmas 2014, because it was on my wish list and it was too late for me to remove it after finding out the game's terrible reputation, I really wanted to make a Downfall parody, yeah, remember those? In which the Bunker Group plays the game and encounters all the terrible things in it, consisting of footage from my actual playthrough. As I was playing through the game for the parody, however, I found out that I seemed to enjoy it far more than others would say for other notoriously awful video games like Superman 64 and Big Rigs Over the Road Racing. which led me to start making a script for a video essay called Reviews Are Stupid, and Here's Why. I never bothered to finish the script, nor Rise of Lyric itself, because I became too distracted doing literally everything else. But this is the perfect opportunity for me to discuss the main points of that unfinished potential. I had the script on my backup drive, and I completely forgot how far I made it, solely because I wrote a full, at least as of the experience I had up to that point, Rise of Lyric review in there. After that point, though, was only a section of several notes I took, but still far more than I thought I had. I'm going to take these points, as well as the intro to that potential video essay, and incorporate them into this section, because this has become the perfect opportunity for me to do so on this channel. Many reviewers see their opinions on any object as fact, and they pass this fact around to everyone else. In fact, there's a huge difference between a fact and an opinion, and we should have learned this and kept it very well since elementary school. And seeing certain things I love being hated by everyone and things I hate being loved by everyone just depresses me to no end, making me feel like the absolute worst thing ever for even thinking about detracting from popular opinion. No, wait, excuse me, fact. In fact, my dad actually has quite a few unpopular opinions that would contradict facts by reviews. For example, he loves the TV show Hogan's Heroes. It's considered to be one of the worst TV shows ever made, even though I can't seem to find much evidence of that reputation anywhere. He thinks that Gone with the Wind, a masterpiece of a movie that is still the #1 top-grossing movie after inflation, is incredibly boring. He feels that Terminator 2 is inferior to Terminators 1 and 3. Yes, he actually feels that Terminator 3 is underrated. When I brought up the possibility of unpopular opinions to him, he said Einstein's theory was right. Everything is relative. And that was the point I realized that everything, even reviews, is relative to whoever wrote it. I'm glad that I'm not the only one who realized that. Other YouTubers would go on to make other video essays with similar topics and conclusions, including this one from MML, discussing why objectivity itself is a myth, even outside of media. And now I recommend all of you see that video in this card or the description, because he does a far better job hammering the point home than I will ever be capable of. But if that video's points are too general or off topic for you, then Jack Saint's video essay about art specifically should still be a good enough starting point to transition to MML's video. Another thing is that for the past 2 decades, the concept of the video caustic critic has existed just to make us laugh our asses off at their creative and funny bashing of certain bad works. But as I have learned from cinema wins, and maybe some personal experience as well, literally every single work ever has at least one unironic fan, no matter how poorly received it really is. As soon as you become a fan of a hilarious caustic critic on YouTube or any video hosting website, it's only a matter of time before they start bashing a terrible work that you seem to love with a passion. This is the premise behind the trope, he panned it, now he sucks, in which you suddenly consider that critic to be irredeemably bad just for trashing this underrated masterpiece in the first place. And now I completely sympathize with those who follow and believe this trope. Not only that, but I'm actually starting to side with TV troper Z-Sims when he said that he was completely done with the entire concept of the caustic critic after seeing a section of a Nostalgia Critic commercial special. No wonder this genre made it onto the Web Originals examples list of TV tropes' condemned by history page. But then, as I learned from browsing TV tropes, as well as a few other sources, and a lot of experience and feedback from reviewing the live-action Alvin and the Chipmunks movies on my other channel, An Unexpected Chipmunks Fan, I learned that the whole damn point of reviews is to broaden your horizons on how a movie works. Proper film critics dive deep into a movie's inner workings to figure out the true meanings and fundamentals of how it works and why it's the way it is. If you like a movie, positive reviews should give you extra details you may not have known about as to why it works. If you dislike a movie, negative reviews should give you these same details as to why it doesn't work. The problem here is elitist reviews from people who think they know better than the subject matter, as well as reviews of movies still in theaters telling you to save your time, money, and brain cells by staying away from this movie, go see this other movie instead, and other people who rely on these reviews to make their own ignorant decision to not see these movies solely because of them. So the only reason why I'm making this review video is to give you my personal thoughts on the movie. No remarks telling you to stay away from this movie whatsoever. I mean, if you are a Sonic fan and therefore watching this very video, then by all means, see this movie. After all, I would have said something completely different and far more cynical if it were for all that experience I gained reviewing those other movies on my other channel. So here I go, my review of the Sonic movie sequel. Okay, due to certain circumstances regarding who I'm gonna see this movie with, I actually get to see this movie on opening day, unlike my promise not to in my teaser video, but it will be late at night and I won't have enough time to work on a review script and recording until at least the next day. With that aside, I will be watching this at my local Roadhouse cinema, which I went to for the first time the other month to see Spider-Man No Way Home. Not to directly shill it because I'm not getting paid for it. But this chain allows you to watch a movie and eat restaurant quality food, not just popcorn, though they obviously still have popcorn. I mean, come on. Anyway, without any further words, let's get to the review. When I first saw the first Sonic movie over 2 years ago, I had a lot of mixed feelings on it. I didn't like it nearly as much as I had hoped. I saw it as a mixed bag. As I found out later, however, this is the same kind of quality that could be said for the first Sonic game, which gave me a lot of hope that this movie would be better than the first one, in much the same way the second Sonic game was better than the first game. And as it turns out, my hunch was absolutely correct. This movie is far superior to the first Sonic movie. In fact, I'm not sure if I could find any negatives to say about it at the moment. Well, there actually are a couple I'd like to bring up, but I won't get to that until spoilers. Even if you are not a Sonic fan, this is a great introduction into how the Sonic lore and other media works. This movie is really accurate to the games. And on top of that, if you saw the first Sonic movie, this one answers a lot of questions brought up there as well, though these answers will be discussed in spoilers as well. Jim Carrey is just as entertaining and hammy as Dr. Robotnik as he was in the first Sonic movie, if not even more so, especially during the final sequence where he takes on another form and the filmmakers manage to adapt his hammy body language there. To quote my younger sister, this movie was everything I could have hoped for, and so much more. Well, there's not a lot left for me to say without going into spoilers, so here we go. Is Jeff Fowler a fan of the Russo brothers? Because the first two scenes start with large blue, in-your-face location titles. The first one for the Mushroom Planet and the other for Seattle. Speaking of that Mushroom Planet, I was absolutely expecting Robotnik to try and find as many materials as he could there to build a spaceship to launch off the planet and return to Earth that way. But that would be proven wrong, as after month of trying to survive off of revolting mushroom juice, an interdimensional portal ring opens up by itself, and Knuckles shows up looking for a sacred artifact, and that's how Eggman returned to Earth. They also managed to capture Knuckles' ignorance of technology and other Earth traditions as well, though bringing them up here could probably be too non sequitur. Sonic's arc begins right after the main title card in, where else, Seattle, where he stops a robbery in action with all his usual quips. but that was seen as bad and irresponsible to Donut Lord, who found out that Sonic also destroyed a city block there. Speaking of which, Tom Wachowski has become far more of a father figure towards Sonic, with the latter feeling reluctant about it at first, but then by the end, he went so far as to call Tom Dad. They finally fully established Sonic's fear of water in this movie, with him even quoting Indiana Jones at one point, albeit replacing snakes, of course. Tails' very first scene here is exactly the same as the post-credit scene of the first Sonic movie, with a backpack added to him this time around. I really like how they set up his backstory. Just like in past Tails backstories, he's established as being made fun of because of his twin tails. That would isolate him to his workshop probably all by himself, until Sonic's EMP from the baseball field in the first Sonic movie got read by his signal readers. Tails has been watching him ever since, and unlike previous fan theories where he was sent by Longclaw to search for Sonic, Tails' search mission was done all by himself. And just like in the games, Tails was the one who looks up to Sonic and even enjoys his sense of humor at one point or another. Then when they go off on their quest to search for this artifact, they end up in the middle of the Siberian tundra and find a lodge to ask for directions. Here, they hide themselves under winter clothes from the rascals that reside there. And it was there that they attempt to order strange and disgusting food. And since the rascals speak probably Russian, which to me has aged horribly because of some political course of events that has been happening as of the making of this video, Tails brings out his translator to try and translate what they are saying, with glitchy, busted, and especially rude results. That was when they finally swiped their covers off, and Sonic repeats the meow there. Just so they could avoid being tossed into the fire, they decide to do a Russian dance-off, where they badly lose to the standard dance moves, until Sonic dashes over to a stereo and starts up, why use Uptown Funk of all songs in 2022? We're all sick of it. In fact, that might actually be the biggest negative I have for this movie right now. After the dance-off, they decide to just stay at the lodge until the next morning. Tails falls asleep by the fireplace, Sonic tucks him in, then tucks himself in right next to Tails, and then Tails wipes his tails over Sonic as a blanket. This part personally satisfied me, as I have been obsessed with having something like that happen, and I even animated it a couple times before. The Master Emerald is given a brand new backstory here, but it very heavily resembles that of the Lord of the Rings, which seems a bit lazy. Here, the Echidna tribe invented 7 Chaos Emeralds that would eventually combine together to form the Master Emerald. This Master Emerald would be given to one Echidna soldier to be given unlimited power for good, but Longclaw saw it as evil, so she took the emerald and hid it away from everybody, just so she would not risk exposing it to anyone and having it be used for evil. In my preconceptions, I said I felt really skeptical when the trailers showed the Master Emerald, but not the other Chaos Emeralds. But now I know why they hid them away from the marketing that I have seen. I decided not to see anything beyond the 2 trailers and a couple TV spots in fears of spoilers placed in the others. The 7 Chaos Emeralds are the Master Emerald when combined. Then when Robotnik betrays Knuckles and steals the Master Emerald for himself, he becomes far more robotic in performance and even forms the Death Egg robot out of scrap metal from tanks and trains. After a big fight there with its ups and downs, and after Robotnik seemingly stomps Sonic, Tom, and Maddie to death with the crumbled Master Emerald and its 7 Chaos remains in Sonic's hands, it was thwarted by, I saw it coming but I still felt excited about it, Super Sonic! I am just glad that they had this form show up at the very end of the final battle, especially after they teased the Master Emerald, and then they showed that the 7 Chaos Emeralds required to power a super form were a part of it. Then after the battle is over, Knuckles gets skeptical that Sonic isn't the same anymore, and then Sonic uses his unlimited Dark Lord Sauron power to form a couple chili dogs out of thin air. Then he immediately rejects his new super form because it gave him too much power, because no, I will not say that overused Spider-Man quote here. With all that said, I think I'm pretty satisfied with this movie. It is that good. In fact, I'm not even nearly as hyped for the third installment, in which they teased the introduction of Shadow there in the newly official Sonic Cinematic Universe, as I was here. Not because I hated the series up to that point, not even close, but because this movie is just so good that I'm not even sure if anything could top it. At this point, I'm even more willing to pre-order the Blu-ray for this movie for my personal video library than I was for the first Sonic movie.